This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Welcome to our show and welcome to episode 30. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Ryan, we have some special guests today. We have David and Helen Smallbone, and for our listeners, you might initially say, I don't know if I'm familiar with their names yet, but I most certainly guarantee you that you are familiar with their legacy, their family, and the impact that they have had in this faith and Christian community. So we are so excited to have them on the show. We've invited them for a couple of reasons. One, because this is a marriage and family podcast, and we are so passionate about that and really helping to share the stories of how other families are living and how going through those trials and those valleys, how they've come out stronger. And they have such an incredible story. So for one, that reason. And two, there's an incredible movie coming out that we want to tell you about. And they have a big part in this movie. So we're going to tell you all about that in our show today. So we're excited to have them. Ryan, you want to introduce them?
Absolutely. David and Helen, so glad that you're on the show with us. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
Honored to be here.
Yeah.
And as you know, as Michelle said, people may not know who you are, but I know they know your family.
Yeah.
And as Michelle said, the legacy that you guys have given, so maybe tell us a little bit more about you, about your family, and really kind of what your passion is in life.
He's already passing the buck.
When she says jump, I say,
So we are Australians by birth. We've lived here in America for 32 years.
What
When
state
we
are you in
came-
right now? What state do you live in?
We're in Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome.
We've been there for the 32 years, so we haven't moved to any other state. We're very content and happy.
even though
Yeah.
we've traveled to every state.
Yeah. We've done, anyway, we are the parents of better known people. We are the parents. We have 7 children. We have bookend girls and 5 boys in the middle. Our oldest daughter is better known as Rebecca St. James. And then our 2 middle children, well, they can't really have 2 middle children, but, our middle child and the one under are known, Joel and Luke, and they are in for King and Country. So we're sort of better known for our children than for ourselves. But that's
Amazing.
fine. I'm happy.
And also, she is very well known because she's the unsung hero.
Oh,
And Lionsgate
Yes.
are putting out a movie that comes out April 26th about the adventure that I have helped bring into her life, and I've done it joyfully.
Amazing. So amazing. Helen, you are the unsung hero then. That movie coming up is about you.
I actually don't think it is. He likes to tease me because he knows I don't like the limelight very much. But when they did screenings of it early on, they did ask the audience, so is this movie about Helen? And the answer was no. Is this movie about David? The answer was no. Is this movie about family? And the answer was resoundingly yes. So even though it's called Unsung Hero, and I do earnestly believe that mums are the unsung hero because they're usually the glue that holds the family together. They're the one who serves the family and pours their life out for their family. So I do think, and yet it is probably, in my regard, it is the hardest job on the planet because you have so many responsibilities. It's 24/7. You never have a break. You're always got to be reasonably on. And then it's probably, in my view, one of the most unrecognized jobs there is on the planet, or roles. But I am very aware that the hand that rocks the cradle holds the world.
And she's my unsung hero. I cry when I talk about 2 people. I cry when I talk about Jesus because he challenged me to give my life away. Cry when I talk about Helen because she's loved me unconditionally. And Ryan knows, us blokes are flawed, and then we get loved unconditionally. It just blows our mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible. How did you, so you mentioned that, I just want to ask about the family dynamic a little bit here before we dig into some other stuff. 7 children, Three are recognized names, but really they all have their own unique giftings and wirings. We know that your youngest Libby was the tech guru that just came in and helped this whole podcast get set up. So thank you, Libby. But they all play a role, right? They all are using, is that correct? They're all using their own giftings for, are they all involved in some way, shape, or form with the family groups?
Yeah, Rebecca's been doing music for 30 years and she's done a wonderful job. And then our next son down, our oldest son is Daniel, and he does production for King Country. So whenever you see lighting at a For King Country show, he's put that together. Our next son down is Ben. He does video and film. He directed the Priceless movie. Then you've got Joel and Luke for King Country. Next son down is Josh. He runs the business day to day and is quite excellent to do that. And then we've got Libby, our youngest daughter, and I love her so much that I've written a song about her called Flavor Princess in the Whole Wide World. Ryan, have you written a song about your daughter? Come on.
No, I have not.
Ryan, you need to get on that now. Yeah, that sounds like a challenge.
That is. Wow.
You know what? We will not sing for either of you today, but we do sing a lot in the O'Connor home, and we come up with a lot of creative songs.
Yeah.
All the time.
You will be able to create some songs for your kids then.
Yeah.
It's sort of become a bit of a joke, David's song.
It was a joke.
And he does go around and sort of brag on it until somebody else sort of volunteers to play their song. And then he's like, you know what, I'm good, you know. So he does get a little intimidated.
Well, I love it. It's such a great representation of the body of Christ too, where, you know, the eye can't say to the hand or to the foot, gosh, I'd rather be an eye, because all of the parts are so important. So while some are more public facing, I love that everyone is using their giftings to really reach the kingdom for kingdom work. You know, none is more important or less important than the other. They're all vital parts of the body. So I love that your whole family is involved in that. That's so cool.
It's a lovely experience. And our core principles with the King Country are loving on the brokenhearted and sharing the most wonderful message known to man to as many people as possible. So whenever we come up against a hard question, that's what we put it through. And I think we have experienced God's economy, and we've worked Helen and I have known each other for 53 years, and I've always been around the media world, and so we've lived it, you know, pretty closely, and it's always been encouraging to me that she's supported me through thick and thin. And the craziest thing is, when we went through our hard times, when we came to America 32 years ago, that made our marriage stronger, because during that period, she didn't criticize me. My self-worth was on an all-time low. I couldn't find work in the industry. We did all the things Americans don't like doing. And even though she had her mother calling her every month in the second year saying, hey, it's not working in America, come home, she never faltered. And that unconditional love that I saw firsthand, even to this day, touches me in a very deep place.
I think also, Michelle, Ryan, a lot of people can look at our family and see success, but we're very mindful as parents, and now we're matriarch and patriarch of a very big family. Mm-hmm. We actually are now a family of 30 and a half.
Wow.
We've got another little baby due. We have 15 and a half grandchildren. So we're sort of, we're very mindful that what God has given us came out of brokenness and came out of failure, really. We lost everything back in Australia. David was in Christian music back in Australia, which is a very hard thing to do because we have the same landmass as North America, but we have a tenth of the population, and the population in Australia is really mostly post-Christian. So we're sort of, for him to do Christian music with such a small population, such a large landmass, was extremely hard. And when we did lose everything, we learnt to function or work together as a family.
It brought the family together, really.
It did. And we learned to rely on each other. We actually, as David mentioned, did the menial tasks. We actually, I think Rebecca did a lot of babysitting. We did gardening. We did lawn raking. We cleaned. We did a lot of stuff like cash paying jobs together to help put food on the table, with all of us pretty much working together. And what I love about God, when God takes us through some hard seasons, when those doors close that we have known and been familiar with, and he takes us through a hard season, nothing he teaches is ever wasted. Because in that season, when we learned to work together and to be together, to enjoy one another, really, God used that in order for when Rebecca was signed and started performing and traveling, we all went together, and the boys actually were her road crew. They helped set up and run the sound and the lights. And then we did end up getting a sound guy, and then they would just concentrate on working at setting up the stage and doing stage managing and set up the lights. So we traveled for probably together for at least 10 years. And then on and off, some boys would still come out for the whole of Rebecca's career. And that's really the foundation of where Joel and Luke started. They learnt their skills, they honed their skills in that environment, and it prepared them for what God was giving to them. And still, those boys still pretty much work together and have done for King and Country.
And when the King and Country started, they'd done their 10,000 hours. And it all came out of something that we necessarily didn't want to do. We had them in a Christian school in Australia, and then bang, everything was taken away, forced us to come to America, and we were allowed to live by faith. Our pastor saw the movie a couple of months ago, and he said after it was over, you don't see the miraculous unless you live on the edge.
Well, unless you need a miracle, you don't see miracles.
Wow.
Yeah, and we were forced to live in.
And the incredibly special thing about that season is we all saw God. We all saw God working. The kids did too. And when our faith was weak, God used the kids to actually encourage us, which was another even very special thing.
Helen, can you say that line again about the miracle? How did you word that?
The words that he used were, you don't see miracles unless you need a miracle.
Wow. I'm hearing so much in your story about coming to the United States, about coming here, and even how the bands got started with brokenness and a little bit of despair, like God working in that. Like if it weren't for that time, David, you even said when you were there, when you first came here, it was this crazy season of hardship, but you said that brought you closer together. You wouldn't have been so close had you not gone through that hardship. That's, I feel like, such the story of Ryan and I. We've certainly felt that. I was, I've shared this on the podcast before, but it was a total mess when I first started coming to our home church, Celebrate Community Church, makers of this podcast, and it was so broken. But in that valley, it was like I had nothing else, and I just clung to God, and I clung to coming here, and that was when really God did such a powerful work. But I was so broken, and it's like what you said with the miracle. Like I needed one. Yeah, you felt that in your story.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good word. I think when you look at marriage and you look at struggles that happen, to actually, in the midst of those struggles, draw closer. That's absolutely amazing, because honestly, I think the world kind of tends to say, oh, well, then I'm done with them. Like it's hard. It's not easy. It's kind of that conversation for better or worse, and we had talked about that on a previous episode, like, oh, better sounds better.
Yeah.
But to draw close and to have your marriage grow in the midst of that trial.
I think, Ryan, for me, having been through some pretty hard times, and every marriage, because it's relationships and because people are imperfect, is going to have its ups and downs. It's either those ups and downs are going to be internal in the relationship, between pressing on some of our own stuff, and creating hardship there, or it's going to be external in terms of job loss, change, newness, family crisis. You know, it's going to be coming in, but it will have its good times and its bad times or hard times. For me now, having lived for 49 years, pretty much with this same man, I've recognized that so many people give up on marriage when the hard times come, and they lose something extremely special in that the hard times they hone us, like they make us more like Jesus. They knock off the rough edges of each of us. And then the hard times, if you can allow it, help us to go into a deeper level of relationship as husband and wife, as we follow God, as we see God in our lives. And they miss something that God planned for marriage, which is longevity, to grow old with somebody who you love and who loves you. And they're missing that excellence of what God is wanting to bring to them as individuals and then them as a marriage and a couple. And I actually grieve it a little, because it's sort of like, if you could just keep working through it, you're going to come to a deeper understanding of who God is and what he does in our lives.
It's so good. And it ties into one of the questions I wanted to ask. I'm just going to jump ahead to it because it ties into exactly what you said, Helen. But what advice would you give to people that are feeling like that right now? Like they are in this valley, in this moment of just despair. What advice would you guys give to them?
One of the things that I was influenced very much by was a guy called Larry Crabb. And he put out a book called Inside Out that had a chapter on unconditional love. And it really challenged me 10 years into marriage to love Helen unconditionally instead of conditionally. And I started to do that. And overnight, our marriage went from good to great. But another thing that Larry Crabb, I wanted to meet him, but never met him before he passed away a couple of years ago. Another thing that he said is, the best counsel you can get is not from the professionals, it's from your friends, because your friends know everything about you. The counselors only know what you tell them. And I think I've got 7 accountability partners that I talk about life with, if not every day, every second day, and so they help me and I help them. And it's a really, and some of them are going through hard times, and some of them are going through good times. And there's something about being in community, which is very important. I think a lot of times we think, well, we just got to get the professionals involved. You know, things are going tough. But it's almost like, I believe Larry Crabb was a man of wisdom, and he helped me a lot, because when I went through that issue of because I'd come to America, I'd buy every marriage book under the sun. Every year I'd come over to America from Australia, go to GMA and CBA.
This is before we lost everything when it was working in music.
This is going back 38 years ago. Well, before that. And I'd be here every year for these conferences. I'd buy all these books and I'd come home and Helen say, is there something wrong with our marriage? But I knew internally there was that I had to grow.
Yeah.
And it was that unconditional challenge where I grew. But what I realized going through that, if there had been any issues in our marriage, I would blame Helen. When I had a chance to look at it objectively, it was really me. I was blaming her for my stuff. When I stopped doing that, our marriage went from good to great. So we were given that gift of me being, not really understanding things. And then 5 years after that was when we lost everything. And so I had two jumps in my growth pushed on me. One was reading Larry Crabb's book, which really challenged me. It was more real to me than all the marriage books. And then losing everything, and then Helen still loving me, when I felt like a failure. Like it blows my mind. There was one thing, there was a question we talked about earlier about a practicality. One of the things that I remember when we first came to America, we lived in Brentwood, and we put the kids down at night. Rebecca was our eldest. She'd look after the kids. I think she was 14 or 15. And we would just walk down the road. We would walk, and even to this day, and that was 32 years ago, I remember we would just walk down the street, just she and I, holding hands, talking about the day. It's almost like the rest of the world stopped, and we would encourage each other. She'd talk about what's going on with the kids. I'd talk about what I'd tried to do that day, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. But it was that moment in time. And then she used to run a pet sitting business. And when she did, at the end of the day, she would go out to these pet sitting things, and I'd go with her. And we just have this wonderful thing of talking on the way. And you know what it's like at home? It's so busy doing things, putting the kids to bed, whatever it is, and you forget to have time together. But there's two things: walking together, the early evening, and then driving out while she was doing some work. We'd drive half an hour there, half an hour back. It just allowed us to have really good conversation. Very simple things, but I think in our marriage, very valuable.
I think he's given a really great point of just taking a step away from the busyness and spending time with one another.
With 7 kids, it was busy for us.
And prioritize one another. A lot of times, and I see it a lot in younger families, a lot of times they're prioritizing kids, but they're not actually prioritizing their relationship with their husband or their wife. And the foundation of the home, the health of the home, is this relationship. As we are healthy, so the family and the home is healthy. And this is you've just got to prioritize this. The other thing that I think is really important to remind ourselves in marriage is we're on the same team. We're on the same team. And sometimes we act like we're at each other's odds and we're sort of fighting each other. And in a team atmosphere, if you're fighting your fellow teammates, you're going to lose big time. I mean, whatever you're playing, you're going to lose.
Kids are watching.
Once you realize we're on the same team and we're going for the same goal together, then you give each other grace a little more. Then you try a little harder at making this work. And then you give more of what you need to give in the relationship. And I think that mentality or that perspective, sometimes perspectives make a huge difference to how we live each day.
Yeah. There's so much gold in what you two just unpacked there. I love that. Helen, I love the same team. Ryan, that was a concept that, it's not a new concept, but we talked about that one of our first episodes. I think it was a 5-Minute Friday. You brought that up and said, hey, you're on the same team. Whatever's happening, you're on the same team. That's so gold. I love what you said about the quality time together, taking walks. Ryan and I have done that. And I do feel like for our listeners, if you can get a time where you're taking a walk or driving, it just kind of loosens the walls, brings the walls down where you're doing something. And it feels like the conversation flows a little easier. Yeah. David, what you said about, taking personal responsibility and ownership, so good. It starts, with yourself and that ownership, but also growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. Where is your marriage going? And then the accountability, just to recap this for the listeners, all those nuggets, but accountability, we each have accountability and we have our life groups. I have multiple accountability too. Some are for business, some are personal, but it goes back to that iron sharpening iron. You have to, and it can't just be friends that are going to say, yeah, you go girl, like whatever, you deserve better. You don't want that. You don't want those kind of friends.
Surrounded by those.
You need the iron sharpens iron friends that you're right. Well, they know you and they know it all, but they're not afraid to just say, hey, you're being really ridiculous right now or whatever. But that was so good. Yeah.
Can I just add one thing? So at the beginning of COVID 2020, Helen came to me and said, talking about, okay, how do you work through things? She came to me and said, and I was 70 at the time, she was 64. She said, I want to start praying together every night. Okay, we were a praying family, but we didn't have the discipline of praying together every night. Because when we first got married, 48 years ago, we would pray and she'd pray, and then I'd go to sleep, and that offended her. So we stopped having the discipline every night. But here we are, many, many years later, she comes to me and says, let's start this discipline. And we have. We've followed through every night since then. And the good thing that has happened is that if there's ever any tension with us, and we don't have tension on the big things, but occasionally it's silly little things. Oh, I was late for dinner, I forgot to call her while I was out, or something like that. But if there's any tension, after that prayer time, it's lifted, and we start the next day off with a clean slate.
Yeah. David, thank you so much for sharing that about prayer. And one of the things that I absolutely love, and I think this is great. You're 70 years old and you're still growing in your marriage.
He's 74. And
74,
going.
You guys seem so young, though. Like, there's just a vibrancy to you.
I don't want her to trade me in for a younger model. I've been allowed to be around ministry and sharing the hope in Jesus, and it's so purposeful. I don't think there's anything better. And so, what a privilege I've been given, and working with both Rebecca and for King Country, and we're serious as a heart attack about maximizing this wonderful message. And every day, even as we speak, we're talking about some promotion for the movie. How do we connect the true essence of the movie, which is Jesus and family? And, with Lionsgate, the film company, we're trying to work out how is the best way to explain that to the masses, both Christians and she gives me a compliment. She doesn't. She calls a spade and holds me accountable. But she says what I do is not work for me. And
it's passion.
Yeah,
passion.
And
for sure. Yeah.
So honored that I'm allowed to be in the ministry with you guys, with your church, with the church all around the world. I think the only hope for America is revival, and we need to be. We need to be loud about Jesus.
And I think revival, and it's interesting because the movie is about family, but I think revival is going to come. We need to be, through families, through marriages, we need to be inviting Jesus into our homes to be a living presence there. And what I mean by that is we need to be talking about him. Deuteronomy says we got to sit down and we talk about him. We put verses up. We just have him in the home, reminding each of us that we're on a mission. We're not here just for ourselves. We're actually on a mission to serve him. If we've got life, if we've got breath, then we have a purpose. Because when that purpose is done, God's going to take us home. And I think what we've done, and when we do pray together, we're praying, we're sharing praying. So we swap each night. So it's not just on one person's shoulders. If one person's not feeling great that night, we'll share it around. But it's a legacy. I don't think we talk enough these days either about legacy. We were given very godly legacies by our parents. My dad was a Methodist minister. David's father was a Methodist lay preacher. They were very heavily involved in the church. We both grew up in the church. And I want that legacy to continue. And we've been blessed at the moment that it's continued through our kids. They're all Jesus followers. And it's by making our faith practical and present in our home that helps doing that. And now David and I have the privilege, like we received from our parents, to pray for our kids and to pray for our grandkids.
Yeah. That's so great.
And we pray for our friends who have got marriage issues,
or they're sick or needing help. It's just a privilege to pray.
Yeah. I think one of the things we hear so often is, we're just so busy, so busy with this and that. And obviously you guys have, you're pulled in a lot of different directions. How do you manage to keep faith and family priorities in the midst of all of this?
I couldn't live life without faith. So faith to me is as vital as breathing. I don't know how people live without Jesus in their lives. Life's too hard. Life's too unknown to not have him walk it with you and to feel and know his presence with you. Family, I was challenged. We live on a bit of a farm here, and I have was actively raising children for over 32 years, and I did not have another job. So this was my major work, being a mum. And I have developed more hobbies in my latter years. And sometimes I've heard critiques from some of our adult children, like, "Oh, you're putting other people before us." And so I have heeded it to some degree. I do want to have a few hobbies, but I've heeded it to some degree in the fact that if they need me, I will be there, and I will make sure I've got enough systems in place that I can be there when they need us. And I think pretty much for both of us, it is a priority to be in our kids' lives. But I don't want to be in their lives too much, that we're not allowing them to sort of have the freedom to live life.
I will throw you an idea. About 15, 16 years ago, I realized in Christian music that we were in the business of Christian music, but we weren't always in the ministry. So I felt like I was prompted to, at every meeting I took, to do a devotional. So that's pretty interesting, particularly if I'm meeting with somebody who doesn't have a faith perspective, or someone who is Jewish, pull from the Old Testament. And if there's somebody who has a different lifestyle, I'll pull from the love chapter and whatever that. And what that has allowed for a lot of wonderful discussions. I remember sitting down with probably the toughest attorney in Nashville one time, because he'd helped on a record deal we'd done with Warner Brothers years ago, and the guy melted in front of us. The other thing that I think it's very important that sometimes in my world people forget, they forget to prioritize church. I think we need to be fed good food, and we need to be in community. So I'm not allowed to say that I'm cynical of the music business, but I'm a lover of the church. The music business, we've got to get, my small area of influence, trying to bring church into how we do business. But
ministry and how you do business.
Yeah.
It's that community, it's the local church.
It's a church. The church principles are wonderful. They've stood the test of time. Corporate principles are about quarterly profit, and you can walk over people. But you look at your church, the way the church loves on the brokenhearted. It touches us. It touches us deeply. I think it's a practical thing for all of us to be challenging our friends, family, and associates. Be in church. You'll be fed good food, and you'll be encouraged. Generally, I find people who are away from church, it's tough yakka. And so I think that church principle is more important, I believe, than sometimes we're willing to talk about.
I certainly feel that with the church and the importance of it. Just, Ryan shared a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the 4 worst part in marriages, and having a family member that is going through a really tough time right now with a cancer diagnosis, is very advanced. Just seeing our church family wrap around us has been so beautiful. So beautiful. And I'm glad to be a part of a local church that our mission and our vision and mission are to have people meet Jesus, but then be Jesus in the community. Yes. And I feel like that transitions really well into talking about this concept of the unsung hero. It's people living out and being Jesus in their communities. So can we talk about the movie for a little bit? I'm super excited to just hear about the movie. It comes out on April 26th. It's called Unsung Hero. Can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be and just kind of some inside info on the movie?
Well, I think our son Luke does a compassion talk during the For King Country concerts, and he uses abbreviation of our story to tell, if people hadn't have blessed us and cared for us when we were doing it tough, we wouldn't still be here.
And back home to Australia.
And how important it is to continue to love on people who don't have life as I suppose, easy or as well as we do. And people would come up and say, it's a pretty remarkable story. Maybe you need to write a book, tell it more. And I did write some memoirs down in a book called Behind the Lights a couple of years ago. But Luke really was prompted, I think, by the Holy Spirit to actually say, we need to make this into a movie. And so they have, they got a scriptwriter in. There was that fine balance of how much should family be in it and how much should family let somebody else be objective to what has made the family. So they did get a scriptwriter in who's a dad of 5 kids, I think, and he did a remarkable job. And then Joel joined him and our son Joel joined him and refined the script. And then really, once Joel got that involved, and he actually plays David in the movie.
Okay.
He calls it really good therapy.
I was going to say, so he played his dad then. Oh, my gosh.
Yes. And so
he did a pretty good job. He looks a lot like me, surprisingly.
Nice.
He ended up directing it as well. So it really became Joel's passion between helping to refine the script to playing David and learning and realizing all his emotions and expressing those in the film, and then directing the film. It has really become his 18-month plus passion to see this come to life. And I look at it and I see his hand all over it. And Luke was a producer of the movie. He's poured his heart into in different areas, but he's poured his heart into it as well. And it really, it feels a little bit like it's like a love gift to David and me to see sort of our story being out there. But it's a God story, and every single one of us have God stories. I mean, you've mentioned some of yours. This just happens to have the weird thing of being put out there and put on a screen, which I told David a few months ago. I think everybody really should be dead when this happens, but we're not quite there.
She called me one day and said, "Isn't it amazing they're putting this movie out, because most times they do it when the people are already dead, and we're not dead yet."
Do you guys get
hilarious moment?
But you're alive and well. Do you guys get cameos in the movie at all? Are you in it in any way?
Yeah.
I went to Joel at one point because there had been a few cameo roles already that he had thought about doing, and I said, we've got to get cameo roles for everyone, all the kids in this movie, and they all do. The one who's probably got the least role is our son Ben. He did have a scene, and that scene had to be scrapped.
Ben!
And so he actually had a speaking part, which many of them actually did have a speaking part. And so when that got scrapped, they ended up taking his image, his face, etc., and put it on a cereal box that the family used one morning.
Okay, look for the cereal box then. Yay, Ben.
Yes.
But you can have that is going to be something that people do need to sort of keep their eyes out, because it's like find the family. We used to be find Waldo, but now it's find
what
one
do they
of
call
the
that
Smallbone family.
in the movies? Like an Easter egg, right? Like a little fun surprise for people to find.
Yeah, I mean, I love that the whole family is a part of this, and it's something we've heard throughout our conversation today, of just the whole family on board with this mission of Christ. And to share that message, it's, and this movie is going to be such a powerful tool to share that message of family and of Christ's love in the world.
And even coming out before Mother's Day too. Gosh, I think of what a great family movie to go to. Bring your mothers, go see the movie. Yeah. So April 26th. Anything else fun about the movie? I'm going to be looking for the cereal box. That's super cool.
It's all a bit surreal, but Helen and I are excited about supporting it. I just did last night. I did Lipscomb University showed it. And then this weekend we're in LA,
Fresno. So we're really going around as much as we can to.
But to feel your support. We've been so encouraged that the church is supporting this movie, and we feel there's an opportunity to encourage Christians and to challenge non-Christians to follow Jesus and to prioritize family. I think the family's under attack at the moment. The enemy is having a field day, and I think this movie does remind people of the importance of family. And we're shocked that we're involved with it. You know, who would have thought? But it was never about doing. It was God had a better plan than I had.
Yeah. You were just living your life. You weren't living to have a movie made. You were just living your life. But now to have your legacy go on with this movie that will be here forever is amazing.
Yeah.
Did I see that For King and Country does the soundtrack for the movie too?
We've got an inspired soundtrack coming out, and Unsung Hero, and the music through the movie, the orchestration is involved around the song called Unsung Hero. So you'll hear the orchestra playing that song and parts of it all the way through the movie, and then at the end, For King and Country sing Unsung Hero. And it's emotional for me. As soon as I hear the chords, the orchestral chords at the beginning of that song, I am so amazed that the lady to my left knows me warts and all and still wants to hang around, and we do life together. When we first started dating, she wouldn't date me initially because I wasn't a Christian. And then I made a decision at a Bible study, and she dropped the other guy she was with, and we've been together ever since. And that happened 51 years ago. But I promised her adventure, and I have delivered. I haven't given her much security, but I've given her a lot of adventure. And Ryan, you know it. You know, who else do you know that has given their beloved very lovingly 7 children? Not many.
Right.
You know, I had to work hard, buddy.
Oh, that's great.
This beloved is okay. Not having 7. 2 is great for this beloved.
Right.
I love that though. I love that adventure. We talk about that often. It's kind of based on the John Eldredge book about, Wild at Heart. You're calling for adventure, and and it, kind of similar for us too. In that when we had our first official date, I said, "So, Ryan, here's the thing. I've done this my way before, and it's not worked. So I've been on this 2-year journey of not dating, and I need to do it God's way. So where are you plugged into a local church?"
Yeah.
And Ryan was like, not really, not right now. But God did a work in him, and absolutely. It's an amazing story. So
We can't tell you good for each other. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
David and Helen, this has been so great. And just as we wrap up, we like to ask our guests kind of 3 rapid fire questions here. One, what's your marriage why? Why is marriage important to you?
I think my parents had such a good marriage, and it just, I can remember being on the search, and then I believe the Holy Spirit prompted me to one night, a long way away from where I lived, to drop into this little church where Helen's dad was the pastor, and I sat behind Helen, her mum, her brother, future sister-in-law, and she left as soon as the service had finished. Didn't say hello, but her mum did, and her mum said, "Hey, go." She went home, Helen had already got into her pajamas, said, "There's a new guy at church. You need to go and say hello." And I'm so glad my mother-in-law and I weren't always on the same page. It was a little bit of an interesting. We had some interesting moments. But 2 years into marriage, she said she'd been very critical of me, and Helen had to go to her and say, "Hey, Mum, unless you stop criticizing David, I'm going to have to make a decision between you or he." And she never criticized me ever again. And it took me a while to forgive her for some of her criticisms, unfortunately. But at the end of her life, they would come to America, and we would travel all over America in an RV on tour with Rebecca. And we had some interesting moments, but we finished strong. So I was happy about that.
I think the why for me is the commandments that Jesus left us with were love God and love each other. And I don't think loving God is the base and the foundation, and learning to love somebody who sees you day in, day out. I just think it's a real privilege, and I think it's part of God's plan.
Yeah, so good. Best date night.
We don't actually have many date nights anymore. We're getting too old to be bothered. Probably, I think our best times that we have together are when it's just David and me, and we're doing stuff together, whether it be going for that walk, whether it be traveling in the car, whether it be praying at night. But it's usually doing something together. But it can be anything, I think, really. It's just being together.
Yeah, I think the date thing, probably because of our age, is a bit overrated. We do a lot together. But I remember maybe the end of last year, we were lying in bed at the end of a long day, and I said to Helen, this is my most peaceful place. Mm-hmm. Being with you, with nothing else going on. And it's crazy. She still lights up my life. It's an interesting comment about her marriage, about our marriage she made a little while ago. She said, and I think it's fair, if I was to pass away, she'd be okay. But if she was to pass away, I wouldn't be too good. And I think, and she's my rock, music business is crazy. It's very emotional, ups and downs. But she's just, she was very consistent. One of the things I didn't say about the kids earlier, which I think might be helpful, is there's something about, we were on the same page with discipline. And so maybe a message to other parents, I should have mentioned this earlier, but if parents can be on the same page of discipline with their kids, I think that helped us a lot, because it wasn't, the kids could go to one parent and that parent would be against the other. We were always on the same page. And I think with all our kids, that was very helpful.
The last question we have is, after 49 years of marriage, what's bringing you joy right now?
The privilege of being together and seeing our family grow. What's bringing us joy? I think the privilege of to grow old together, really, to tell you the honest truth, to grow old together, to be loved, to love, and to see our family grow, and to be able to be matriarch and patriarch to 30 other people. And you just don't know where that's going to go, where that legacy is going to go long term. And it's just beautiful to look back and see God's hand on our life, and to see God's hand leading and guiding, even through the hard times, his presence with us. That brings great joy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful. David and Helen, this has been so incredible to have you as guests on the show. And I feel like it's such an inspiration for Ryan and I, just looking at the love that you can just feel it through the screen. It's just so just felt through this conversation. And the words as we were preparing for this that came to my mind was, they really are matriarch and patriarch of the family. So to hear you say that, and just as the legacy that you've created and are leaving, is such a beautiful thing. So thank you for being on the show. Do you have any final parting thoughts for our listeners?
Just keep God at the center of your marriage. Final thoughts, and just keep on serving him, because if we put him at the center of our marriage, he's going to teach us and he's going to speak to us about what we need to change in our own lives, or how we need to grow. And it's just the foundation to live life on.
And I would just say, the idea of loving unconditionally, because when I started loving Helen unconditionally, suddenly our marriage went from good to great. And it was that discovery 10 years into marriage that I think allowed our marriage to grow at a very important time.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this incredible interview today. We cannot encourage you enough to mark your calendar for the date of April 26th. We are going to keep just promoting this as we get closer to the movie. Tune in next week as well. We just want to see this movie succeed because it's going to be so special and such a gift. So maybe you consider bringing your family, your life group, your mother, whomever. But April 26th, the movie Unsung Hero, really inspired by David and Helen Smallbone. So thank you, David and Helen, for being on our show today. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you for joining us today. If you need additional help for your marriage or resources, as always, you can join us at celebrate.church/marriage. Additionally, we would love to hear your takeaways from today's episode or any of our episodes. You can call our call line or text in with feedback at 605-951-0110. We would love to read that or play that on air if you have a testimonial to share about the impact of the Celebrate MarriageCast. And in the meantime, we will post all of the notes we talked about in our show notes. We hope that you have a great week.